Welcome to Horror World MP4, where every story opens a door you may wish had stayed closed. Tonight, I invite you to step with me into a memory that still rattles my bones and leaves my chest tight every time I dare to recall it. Years ago, I lived with my family in a quiet neighborhood at the edge of a forgotten town. The houses there leaned against time, like weary travelers, their paint flaking, their windows clouded with the dust of decades. Next to our own modest home stood an ancient house with a backyard pond. On calm afternoons, the soft ripples of that pond carried the cheerful quacks of a plump flock of ducks, a scene so peaceful it almost felt like a painting, until the painting began to rot from within. At first, nothing betrayed the darkness beneath that still water. My sister and I would play in our yard, catching glimpses of the old woman next door, tending her garden or scattering feed for her ducks. The air always smelled of damp soil and fallen leaves, the sort of scent that makes you believe the world is harmless. But every time I glanced at that weathered house, something in me stiffened. The crooked roof seemed to lean forward, listening. The windows reflected the sky but gave back no light. Even as a child, I felt the silence there watching me, waiting. If you dare to follow this story to its bitter end, please subscribe now and help this channel create more haunting tales that will keep you awake long after the video ends. The first sign that something was terribly wrong arrived quietly, like a breath of cold air through a locked window. One gray morning, my sister and I hurried to the backyard as we always did, eager to hear the ducks next door. But the pond lay empty, the water still and silent as a sheet of glass. No ripples, no feathers, no sound of life. It was as if the flock had been erased overnight. We searched the ground for tracks or scattered down, anything to explain their disappearance, but there was nothing. No predator, no broken fence, not even a smear of blood. The air itself seemed to tighten around us, as if holding a secret too heavy to release. That evening, my grandmother pulled me aside. Her eyes, sharp despite her years, held a weight that made my stomach knot. She whispered that for 3 nights she had seen a girl in a crimson dress standing on the neighbor's roof. Always at exactly 3 in the morning, always for a single hour, then gone before the first hint of dawn. I laughed nervously, but my laughter fell flat against her steady gaze. She described the figure in fragments, the dress fluttering though no wind stirred, the way the moonlight never quite touched her face. My grandmother warned me to keep the curtains closed, to ignore any sound that might come from the yard. I tried to dismiss her words as the ramblings of an old woman, but as darkness settled over the neighborhood, a restless unease crept into my chest. Even the familiar creak of the house felt different that night, like bones shifting in their sleep. Something was approaching. Something that had already marked our home without leaving a single footprint. The following afternoon carried a heat that pressed against my skin like damp cloth. I was chasing my sister across the yard when a sharp scream sliced through the thick air. It came from the neighbor's property, a sound so raw it seemed to tear the sky. Heart hammering, I ran to the fence and peered through the slats. Where there had once been a harmless pile of firewood lay a grotesque arrangement of bones. Bleached fragments of ribs, the curve of tiny skulls, and dark stains that shimmered wetly in the sunlight. The smell arrived next, sour and metallic. A stench that burned my throat and made my eyes water. Flies swarmed in frantic clouds, their buzzing a feverish soundtrack to the horror before me. The old woman stood a few feet away, frozen as if her body no longer belonged to her. Her eyes were wide, glassy, fixed on the mound as though trying to understand whether it was real. For a moment, the world around us seemed to dim. Even the birds fell silent. I felt the ground tilt beneath my feet, and my breath came in short, jagged bursts. My sister tugged at my sleeve, too small to see over the fence but sensing my terror. I tightened my grip on her hand, shielding her from the sight while my own mind screamed for answers. There were no answers, only the relentless stench of decay and the crawling movement of insects claiming their prize. I backed away, every step heavier than the last, and shut the back door with trembling fingers. Behind me, the scream of earlier still echoed inside my skull. Whatever had devoured those ducks, whatever had left that ghastly monument, was not finished with us. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay in bed listening to the house breathe, timbers creaking, pipes murmuring, until a metallic clang jolted me upright. The clock on my nightstand glowed 2:59 a.m. I crept to the window, each step weighed down by a dread I could not name. The yard was awash in pale moonlight, and on the fence stood a figure. A girl, impossibly balanced on the narrow beam, her red dress swaying through the night air was perfectly still. Her hair hung in a dark curtain, concealing her face, but what rooted me to the spot were her feet. Where there should have been toes were two black, curved horns, digging effortlessly into the wood. With each step she made a low, splintering sound, as if the fence itself protested her presence. She moved with unnatural grace, neither fast nor slow, simply inevitable. Then, without warning, she leapt down into our yard. She landed on all fours like an animal, limbs bending at angles that defied human bone. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her head. The face that met mine was a nightmare given flesh. Her skin was the color of old paper, stretched tight across sharp bones. Her eyes were not eyes at all, only deep, empty sockets filled with a viscous black fluid that oozed and pulsed. Tiny insects writhed within it, crawling in and out of the darkness as if it were alive. She tilted her head, a slow, jerking motion, and then charged the window. The glass rattled under her fists as she struck again and again, each blow accompanied by a shriek that seemed to claw at the inside of my skull. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped, my body locked in a paralysis more powerful than fear. Time lost all meaning as the assault continued. The girl pounded the window with a relentless rhythm, her mouth opening in a silent wail before each strike. I could see the muscles in her jaw twitch, hear the faint crunch of bone as she twisted her neck at impossible angles. The black liquid in her sockets splattered against the glass, streaking it with oily trails that glistened in the moonlight. Every few seconds, a beetle or centipede would crawl out, only to vanish back into the shifting darkness within her skull. I stood frozen, my palms slick against the cold windowsill. My mind screamed for me to run, to hide, to do anything but watch, yet my body betrayed me. It felt as if invisible hands held me upright, forcing me to witness her every movement. The room seemed to shrink around me, the air heavy with the sour scent of decay and something far older, a rot that belonged to no living creature. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the nightmare faltered. The clock on my nightstand clicked to 4 a.m., and with that quiet sound the girl stopped. She tilted her head one last time, almost curious, before retreating into the shadows. Her outline dissolved against the fence until only the moonlight remained. For a long moment I stayed at the window, unable to trust my own senses. When I finally turned away, my legs gave out and I collapsed to the floor, shaking so violently I thought my bones might splinter. Dawn eventually crept across the sky, but the light brought no comfort. The memory of those hollow sockets, the crawling insects, the smell of death, those would follow me long after the sun rose. Some nights, even now, I swear I hear her tapping, patient and waiting. This has been Horror World MP4. If this story chilled your blood and left you looking over your shoulder, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next terrifying tale waiting in the dark.